Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. What is it exactly that we have been fighting since COVID? Now, I've been, on one hand, been fighting COVID authoritarianism. But if you notice, what I've mostly been fighting isn't really COVID authoritarianism. It is the psychosocial forces that happen to be there during COVID authoritarianism. But those same kinds of psychosocial forces happen in all kinds of contexts. They happen everywhere, and especially dangerously in the great democides and genocides. And of course, there's many less dangerous things like that than that. COVID being one case, which was less dangerous, the authoritarianism that happened, and the totalitarianism that happened, which was very dangerous, but still not at those levels. And climate change, right? Now, the nice thing about climate change is that, it's been around, my whole lifetime. Every day, every week, there's news articles exaggerating this, exaggerating that. It was so obviously a collective hysteria all these years. And I think it was a slow burn one, as opposed to the sort of COVID overnight, the whole world beating as one and saying, here's these new righteous cult rules that everybody has to follow. But I feel as if COVID and everything that people saw with COVID should now make it clearer that when they see the same exact kinds of behaviors, the same kinds of justifications, and calling people deniers, as they always had, calling people deniers for not believing that the heat wave in Europe right now is a sign, or the fires over there are a sign of global warming, that you can see that this is not right. This is just the next thing. This is just another next thing. Then the crowds are rushing over there to the next thing, and then they rush back to this other next thing. What I have been fighting for the last 3 years, and what Loofwire tries to do, Loofwire.com, this sort of magazine based on being aloof of exactly these sorts of mob trends, and what FreeX.group and this whole series is about, is trying to understand why it is that humans end up in mobs rushing towards the next thing, right? It's not about fighting the next thing. It's about fighting the human psychosocial tendency to keep driving crowds towards the next thing. Right? So this is crucial. Look, suppose we did a better job at Team Reality in arguing the utilitarian points against COVID authoritarianism, all the restrictions. We could sigh a big breath of relief, and we did a good job up. Then the crowd shoots the other way, and they're bouncing in one about global warming, right? And then maybe you manage to say, look, if you calm down, doesn't even make sense. What you're doing, the interventions wouldn't work. It's not a big problem, even if it were true, and it doesn't appear to be true. There's all the, whatever. You do whatever, and you convince them it doesn't matter, because next they're all going to be rushing towards some next thing, right? It's always going to be a next thing. The fight is with our propensity to keep rushing towards next things, right? So it's very frustrating. Once you see the world this way, as all of these rushings toward the next thing and rushing back towards the next thing, you're not really worried about the next things so much as you are about this propensity that people have, that human groups have. That's the point. That's what I've been going on about since the beginning of COVID, and my sort of tweet that was pinned forever. It's sort of at the end of the current pinned tweet. It's at the end of the current pinned tweet that the moral of coronavirus 19 isn't about biological contagion. It's about the dangers of social contagion. Right? That's the moral. That's what I still take the moral to be, and that's what I've been on about for 3 years. How do we fight this? How do we inhibit them in the future? How do we each individually remain or put ourselves into kind of a state such that we're immune to these sorts of things, so that we can push back when it occurs, because it's going to occur. It's constantly occurring in small scales, and occasionally they happen in large scales, just like virality. You end up with a very small number of highly viral cases, but you end up with lots and lots of minor viralities all the time. Do we want our societies to be just these sequences of viral avalanches that cross us all the time? Stampeding left and stampeding right in smaller or greater amounts every year, every decade, every century, forever? Or can we come to better understand these so that maybe we can either quell them or make them harmless when they do occur. All right. And that was your Science Moment. If you're interested in supporting the very kind of study that studies this, studies not just freedom and free expression and collective hysteria, but how can we understand these so that we can understand all of these kinds of collective madnesses, come to freex.group, find the support page, or subscribe here at YouTube, become a member at loopwire.com to support independent science, focusing on what matters.